welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. I'm Frata Eleftheria, and well, I've had my work cut out for me these last few days. I've appeared in a live stream, the Synaxis live stream, that went for 3.5 hours. It's the second Synaxis that I've done. And I've also appeared on the Psicoactivo Podcast for the second time. So I've been doing a lot. There's things that have come to my attention recently that you'd probably find interesting. And it's coming towards the end of the snake year, 2025, which in the Chinese year actually ends on February the 16th. So it's a good opportunity to talk about the year that is behind us astrologically, the year of change that is ahead with the coming of the fire horse year, and specifically some of the predictions that have been made around the year 2026 by figures which I'm sure will be familiar to people from the UAP space. But I do think that in a lot of ways we are living through a time of great change at the moment. You know, it's the beginning of the fire horse year soon. On the beginning of the fire horse year, February the 17th, we also have a new moon and a solar eclipse in Aquarius. So big changes on the horizon indeed. We also have a lot of outer planets that have been shifting into new houses since last year. And when this happens, it's a herald of a generational change because the orbit of these planets is so huge because they're so far away from the sun that it takes 30 years at least in the case of Saturn, if not longer for the others, for them to do a full orbit around the sun. So that promises changes on the horizon. And of course, there is Chris Bledsoe's prophecy, prediction, whatever you want to call it, about 2026, presumably around Easter of 2026, when the lady has told him that there's going to be a new knowledge that is going to be presented to the world. But of course, we're already starting to see the change. This year already, even though it's only February, mid-February, we've seen the established order being shaken in a lot of ways. We've seen mass protests in Iran, we've seen the situation in Minneapolis, we've seen Maduro overthrown in Venezuela, and of course, there is the release of the latest Epstein files, which has really shaken things up. And it's started to wake a lot of people up who were completely asleep before to the true nature of reality and the true nature of the people who are ruling us. And these latest Epstein files, I've been reading them here and there, and there's some stuff in there that is truly blood-curdling. I've touched upon just a little bit of it in my previous video, and it's really disgusting. And it should make us extremely, extremely angry at the elites, at the people at the top of society, at the very least in the US and Europe, the bankers, the heads of corporations, the politicians, but also Hollywood celebrities. All of the people who have been telling us how to live our lives, in the meantime, doing unspeakable things in the background that only the most depraved human being would do. And then telling us that we can only have 3 new items of clothing every year. It's just truly makes your blood boil. And I hope that something comes of this and we don't just forget about it. And but the signs in the heavens suggest that perhaps they will. Not to get people's hopes up, of course. But we need to remember what's happened, what's been revealed, and we can't just forget it. We need to remember. And I think that the elites, as a result of the Epstein files being released, have lost any moral legitimacy that they might have had. It's just completely gone. And we shouldn't be ruled by illegitimate leaders And that's why we can't forget about this, and we can't let this go without consequences. So I hope for a change in the future to the way things are. And I've been waiting for the rest of society to agree with me that we need to change the way we've been doing things since I was like 15 years old. So, you know, it's really satisfying to see that perhaps that's something that's on the horizon, but we'll see. But I want to focus more on the positive in this video and some of the positive changes that are potentially afoot, in particular this 2026 prediction. I've been looking into this a bit more recently. I only found out about it within the last year. So I found out about it in about July or June of 2025 for the first time, when I first really started to take a deep dive into the world of UAPs and some of the law around that, and particularly the spiritual side of the UAP issue. And of course, Chris Bledsoe came up. And that's when I heard this 2026 prediction about the new knowledge purportedly given to Bledsoe by a higher being known as the Lady. And as I've been looking into this, I saw something interesting which Jordan Crowder was talking about on his channel, where he was trying to actually pinpoint with a bit more specificity exactly what this event was that was being predicted. The Regulus rising on a particular day when the Sphinx was looking at this heavenly event. He talks about Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet, and ties it into how Cayce had these visions about these secret tunnels underneath the Sphinx, which housed the Hall of Records, the secret knowledge from the Atlantean civilization that had been left underneath the Sphinx. And so there's this idea within the New Age community that there's this Hall of Records underneath the Sphinx. And so the significance of the Sphinx being in the Lady's prediction is, of course, that the Sphinx is associated with that particular type of knowledge that has been buried for millennia, associated with this Atlantean civilization, whatever that might be. So this is all very interesting. And I had my own dream when I was fairly young about somebody discovering something under the Sphinx, an archaeologist finding like a tablet underneath the Sphinx. So I've felt something at least symbolically significant about the Sphinx and the kind of hidden ancient knowledge that it might represent. So I found that take very interesting as well. But I've had a look into this Hall of Records idea that Edgar Cayce saw in some of his visions. It actually doesn't originate with Cayce, the idea that there's hidden knowledge underneath the Sphinx somewhere in that vicinity. In fact, there is a medieval Islamic legend about a king of Egypt by the name of Surid ibn Saluk, who ruled Egypt 300 years before the Great Flood. And according to this legend, it was this king Surid who built the Pyramid of Giza. And in medieval Muslim legends as well, there's also this idea that there's a complex of tunnels underneath the Giza complex, so the pyramid and the Sphinx. And in this story of King Surid, the king apparently foresaw that there would be some great cataclysm that would destroy his antediluvian civilization, which was based in Egypt. And so because of that, he built the pyramid at Giza to house all the knowledge of his civilization in the event that they were wiped out. And in some accounts, this Surid ibn Saluk is identified as none other than the prophet Enoch, who is one and the same with Hermes Trismegistus, otherwise known as Thoth. This is fascinating because both Thoth and Enoch, who were considered to be the same by rabbis and others in previous centuries, they had some similarities about them. And one of these is that there was a legend attached to them that they were the authors of books that contained the secrets of the universe, that contained this wealth of knowledge about the mysteries of existence. But these books were then lost. And so, if you think about it, this lost book of Thoth, or this lost book of Enoch, would have to be the same kind of knowledge that would have been stored in the Giza area, if that legend actually turned out to be true. So definitely, if there was a real king who really was storing ancient knowledge somewhere in Egypt, and he was identical with Enoch, then the knowledge within the lost book of Enoch would undoubtedly be contained among that knowledge. And so we can start to broaden our idea of what this new knowledge might actually be referring to. It's not necessarily something that's literally going to be found underneath the Sphinx, but perhaps whatever it is that is to be found, it has this connotation with a lost ancient form of knowledge that has been recovered in some way, which we associate with Atlantis, we associate with antediluvian times, we associate with beings such as Thoth and Enoch. But it's not necessarily something that we're literally going to find buried. And I think that if you look at the archaeological evidence that we have available today, despite some suggestions that the Sphinx is 12,600 years old, or however old it is, I think that more than likely the Giza complex was all built sometime in the Old Kingdom Egypt. I think the evidence still points very strongly to that conclusion. And what small amount of archaeological investigation there has been into what's underneath the Sphinx has so far not revealed any man-made structures. But that's not to say that this idea of knowledge being revealed that is associated with the legends of that place is something that's not real. We just need to start thinking about things more symbolically, perhaps. So if not through some archaeological excavation, how else might we recover the lost knowledge of Thoth and or Enoch? Well, there have been a couple of people within the occult world that I've studied for many years now who have claimed that they've restored the knowledge from the Book of Thoth or the Book of Enoch, or that they know where that knowledge is. And so the first example of this is the tarot. There was a theory starting probably around the 18th century that the cards of the tarot originated from the lost Book of Thoth, and that knowledge was passed down in the form of the tarot, what would eventually become the tarot trumps. However, if you look at the history of the tarot, it's pretty clear how it started. Around the 15th century, there was a new Italian card game that came about, which was an extension of an older card game which made use of the four suits, which became the modern playing cards. But there were extra figures that were attached to these cards as trumps. 16 at first, associated with the Roman gods, and then expanded to the 22 that we know today. So we know the origins of that, and the Roman gods had nothing to do with Egypt. They were Indo-European in origin. So we know where the tarot came from, and it's got nothing to do with Egypt or the Book of Thoth. So that's just a myth. But is there anyone else in the occult world who claims to have recovered or have a method for recovering the lost knowledge of Thoth or Enoch? And in fact, there is such a person. And that person was, of course, John Dee. John Dee, together with Edward Kelly, developed the system of magic known as Enochian magic, in which they communicated with angels using a scrying crystal. I've spoken about that a lot on this channel. it's kind of my special interest. So one of the things which Enochian magic was supposed to be able to do, at least one type of it, was to recover the knowledge that was in the Lost Book of Enoch. This Lost Book of Enoch was something that John Dee was obsessed with and wanted to find, and he asked the angels about this book in his communications with them, in his scrying sessions. And the angels eventually did offer to reveal the contents of this Lost Book of Enoch, which is this lost knowledge that we're talking about. And the way that they communicated that knowledge, the knowledge that was in the Lost Book of Enoch, was by communicating a series of very cryptic tables with lots of letters in them which were unreadable, which were known as the tables of Lower Gaiath, or the tables of Logger. And so this was supposed to be the Lost Book of Enoch, finally once again dictated. But the problem was you couldn't read it. So the angels then gave John Dee and Edward Kelly a series of calls or magical incantations which would allow them to divine the mysteries of these tables using a scrying technique to draw the knowledge out of them in a way that was intelligible. And so there was, by reading the 49 calls and scrying, after having read the calls, you would get all the knowledge that was hidden in the Lost Book of Enoch. And so we have this technique available to us through Enochian magic. And so that invites us to think about whether the way that we're going to receive this new knowledge in 2026 around Easter, purportedly, has something to do with psionic techniques to gain knowledge in a supernormal way, which perhaps includes communications with non-human intelligences, and that is the way that the new knowledge is going to come into the world. And maybe this is the missing piece that we need in order to really understand the 2026 prediction that the lady purportedly gave us through Chris Bledsoe. So that's something that I wanted to share with you that has kind of sprung into my mind, and something that we can ruminate over as we enter this time of great change, and perhaps something that can give us hope, because revealed knowledge down through the centuries has been something which has had a great restorative effect on civilization in its times of decline and decay. So I think that it couldn't come at a better time. Rediscovering this connection that we have to the divine and our ability to receive guidance from the divine, and the reality of so-called extra-dimensional beings points us to that as well, and us becoming more and more aware of that reality through the disclosure process, but also becoming aware that this is something that we've known how to do for hundreds of years. So certainly very interesting times, and a lot of things coming to light that have been hidden, not all of it bad. And so I hope that this video has given you some interesting things to think about, other than the great evils that are being perpetrated in our world. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was a bit ad hoc and unplanned, and features our special guest, the cricket. But if you did like it, please leave a like, subscribe to this channel to support my work, ring the notification bell so YouTube actually notifies you of my future videos. If you want to support me further, hit join or thanks down below, and feel free to buy some merch from my merch store. But thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.